Tonight's notes are about a critical battle in the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Saratoga. Up to this point, we've discussed how the Americans forced the British out of Boston, only to then turn and lose badly in the battle for New York City. We've discussed how Washington's army was nearly falling apart in 1776 until his bold moves at the Battle of Trenton won the Americans a much-needed victory. And even though it was a small-scale victory, it was still an important victory. It gave them some confidence, it gave them some hope, and it kept the American Revolution going. So we'll pick up from there today and talk about what leads up to the Battle of Saratoga. Now, it's important to remember that after the Battle of Trenton, the Americans are still very much the underdogs. Right? It was a much-needed win for them, but the British were still the heavy favorites, and it only seemed like it was a matter of time until they forced the Americans to surrender. The Battle of Saratoga is different, and historians have said it was so important that we call it the turning point of the Revolution. So after the Battle of Trenton, Washington continued to retreat and be defensive. He didn't want a large-scale battle with the much larger British army. He decided he would mostly try to fight a defensive war and wear the British army out. Right? Get them so tired of fighting that they just give up. So Washington knows he doesn't really have to win. He just has to not lose, and he's trying to wear the British out. So the British decide, well, rather than continuing to chase General Washington all over the place, let's focus on cutting New England off from the other colonies. The plan was to take 3 armies and meet up at Albany, New York. The British had control of the Hudson River, and so the plan was we'll come from 3 different directions. We'll meet up in Albany, New York, and combine our forces, and we'll cut off New England. What was supposed to happen was General Howe was supposed to bring his army north from New York City, up the Hudson River. But instead, he ended up doing the opposite. He decided to go south and capture the colonial capital, Philadelphia. So his army simply never showed up. The British army that was in the west and the Indian allies that they were working with also didn't show up. So they were supposed to come in from the west to Albany, and they end up getting turned back. So this left 1 British army instead of 3. As we see the map here, you can see the British in red, the Americans in blue. What they're hoping to do is trap General Gates. Right? This is the same General Gates that we saw in the movie about the Battle of Trenton, who disagreed with Washington. But he's still a general. He's in charge of an American army that's up in New York, and he is in kind of a dangerous spot. He is where he could get trapped from the 3 British armies. But if we look at this space here, this shows those forces that were supposed to come from the west. They had a couple of battles, and they got turned back. So they never showed up. Down in the south, General Howe's army never showed up at all. So what that left was General Burgoyne's army coming from the north. He's expecting 2 other armies to help him trap the Americans under General Gates. Instead, they go through a series of fights around Saratoga with the result of an American victory. So the British Army runs into a large force of American troops under General Gates, and Gates very smartly cuts the army off from their escape route, right? Rather than allowing them to escape and head back north into Canada, Gates uses some of his army to cut them off and basically trap them. After several battles, the outnumbered British army surrendered 5,000 men in October 1777. So from the British perspective, this is a disaster, right? They're supposed to be combining three armies. They're supposed to greatly outnumber the Americans that are under General Gates. And instead, things get all kinds of messed up. And only one army shows up. They end up being outnumbered. They get cut off. They get trapped. They have to surrender. And this is the first time that the colonists have forced a sizable British force to surrender. 5,000 British soldiers. So, okay, an important victory. But why is it called the turning point? Because of France. After news of the victory reached France, Benjamin Franklin, who had been in France trying to convince the French government to help us out, was finally able to convince the French to enter the war and to help us to join the war on our side. So France has been hesitating. They're thinking, yeah, we can't stand the British, but we don't really want to back you if you're going to lose. So when they saw that the Americans won this impressive victory at the Battle of Saratoga, the French thought, well, you know what? Maybe the Americans do have a chance. Maybe the Americans could defeat our rivals, the British. This gives France the chance to get some revenge. Think all the way back to the French and Indian War. One of the outcomes was France lost a lot of land and a lot of power, and they were going to be looking for chances to get revenge on Britain. Well, this is their chance. This is their opportunity to get revenge. And once they believe that the Americans have a chance to win, they jump in and they help us out. So your response question is to do another picture. Strive to be a little more detailed here, right? Use labels, use symbols. Draw and label a picture that shows an important detail about what happened at the Battle of Saratoga.